No, nämä on about aika samoja kuin sulla tosiaan.
Kaukana olla. Sä oot varmaan tietysti niinku siellä meistä kaikkea. Niinku Stellan kanssa niin
Wow, you don't like that?
tämmönen astia.
You have dangerous ideas like
Antoni
Sitten mä kuvailen, että vähän monta. Ei hallinto rajoittaa meidän työmahdollisuuksia ja jatkuvat kaiken. Sitten vähän peilasin siihen kirjaan, että täällä on vähän samassa. Mä joudun deletoimaan sieltä. Ja sitten kaikki mä tein sä piti luetella jotain kirjallisuutta niin raveltaa ja tehdä niistä jokin juoristu.
Pitäisi olla yleensä.
Sitten mä yritin palauttaa sitä. Sitten meidän palautuslukua ei ollut alvoinut vielä. Niin. Vähän liian nopea oli.
No niin oli just se oli niinku teikerinen, mutta ei sitä
erikseen, kun ne kävi eilen läpi sitä, että kysyi tekemistä.
Just. Ja.
Voi parantaa.
Siis se voi olla, että se...
versio on...
Anna, joo.
Niin.
Hyvä.
siinä pitää myös käyttää kirjallisuutta.
Vaikka jossain käytettävissä jokin, sen osaa vielä. Joo, moi! Kiva tavata oikein. Miten on mennyt?
Kuten myös. Myös teidän
Niin.
Hyvä. Missä vaiheessa se niinku ennen sitä miten?
Se oli rastiruutussa. Leikkailija
Pappoja tuossa meidän lapsia.
Okei, että pääsyn.
Tämä meidän Hanna tuli aamulla aikaisemmin.
No. I think they're
Ja meillä on valmiina siellä mielessä. Ja oli jossain vaiheessa sellainen ihan viikollisia ilmaisia kokeiluja internetin. Muistaakseni, että sellainen kannattaa tulla ensin.
Ole yhtään enempää. Enempää, mutta kukaan ei tiedä mitä nää on.
Jotain saadaan.
Ottakaa nyt enemmän. Ottakaa nyt enemmän. Onko se jotain muuta sitten vielä?
Okei. Hannalla oli vähän sama.
Siinä
mitä aikaisemmin ja sitten onneksi niinku tätä yli.
Puukaa.
Hyvä. Joo, tervetuloa.
Anteeksi vielä tuohon.
Ei ole sun päivä.
Joo.
Tuossa aivan toinen teki kanssa. Oli sitä mieltä, että ei.
Se on mun sisko.
Mä katsoin, että on saman näköinen.
Ihan totta.
Ja mama. Joo.
George, joo. Valmistuu kello.
Ei vale.
Samannäköisiä.
8 minuuttia.
Noin paljon, että meitä mä tein leipää eilen, mä tein focacciaa, mutta ei tässä taas katsoin focacciaa, mä en saa niitä isoja tuplia. Hyvää tää on. Mä otin jopa niitä italialaisia rullajauhettuja jauhettuja. Ja ilman reseptiä. Joo. Se on hyvä.
Sinä et ole kasvanut yhtään viime näköistä.
Se on ihan hyvä, että se oikeasti.
Welcome everybody. A few practical things before we start. When they come in, we all rise and no applause are allowed. Traditional reasons, I don't know exactly why. And also in the end they will ask if audience have any questions, but questions are not allowed for traditional reasons. And when they leave, we rise up. Enjoy. No applause.
The point is that it's a question. It's sort of like an insult. That they like the idea of questions. It's like there's a problem. But other countries. It's just Finland. Just Finland.
Luckily, I haven't asked it.
I know. Why do they do that? Because if there's a situation where you could be a PhD at that point, then you would ask the question, you would reveal that you know something and nobody else knows. Yeah.
Julia promised to take for it. It was not taken at the end of the session. But yeah, you can use your cell phone.
At least in the past. And then once you get on the flag,
We have experience with that.
And then you can ask questions.
But there's actually been sometimes problems with people that say or professors in other countries, and then when they come and they're not told. Some people ask questions and anyway, who wants to buy those people?
I'm sure. PhDs were still
Kato, kun se alkaa 15 yli, niin
Vielä 5.
No ei, kyllähän me hyvä mennään. Niin, kun mä soitan.
Jos ne lähtee heti, kun ne alkaa puhumaan.
Ai ketkänä.
Miten ne väitti? Jäädä kuuntelemaan, kun ne papat rupeaa puhumaan.
Hanna sanoi eilen, että me voidaan sieltä niin kuin aikaisemmin.
Niin, voitte. Se on ihan joustavasti.
Se ei ole kiire, vaikka kuuluu sitten yhteydessä. Juna lähtee vartiin.
Tai saa.
Tässäkö se sun homma oli tältä päivältä?
Ei voida katsoa ammatin luotava ja sinne. Ne on autossa tuolla. Katsotaan varmaan silleen, että muuten ne tulee Suomeen. Pitää siivota.
Hey, Mark. How are you? It's like in a funeral, you have to be in the front row if you're close to the Where from Germany?
From Tanzania. We made it. Hanna wanted us to come. So we arranged it that we come back earlier from Tanzania.
Sitä mieltä, että on tärkeää.
First time in Sweden.
Tykkäällään sanomista.
Lisäksi täällä meille kaikille sanomista.
Ihan yli.
Aloitetaan nämä opetusrummat.
Sorry, it's very lonely. A year ago I had 7 PhDs.
Homma on kuitenkin aika lailla, kun meillä ei ole, me ollaan niin kuormittuneet. Ja edespäin se vastuu, että työaikajärjestelmä.
No, sorry. I fully
Maybe you change your home. They use the same. They use the same.
It's true. That's why you ask.
Aina mikä tässä on tylsää.
Yeah, suit looks
Jos on vakinaisen kampereita, jos sulla on määräaikainen, niin sitten maks 2 vuotta. Varmaan sen takia, että sitten saadaan siihen valittua, kun sulla palataan, niin saadaan valittua paikkaa.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the great pleasure to welcome you to this doctoral defense today in this historical building. The defendant, respondent today is Hanna Rosti, who has studied nocturnal mammals in East Africa for some years now and will present today. Of course, the honorable opponent is Professor Jörg Ganzhorn from the University of Hamburg, who's a well-known authority of primates in Africa, more specifically in the island of Madagascar, where he has studied them for a long time. So I expect a very interesting and lively discussion today. So, as the custos appointed by the Faculty of Biological and Environmental Sciences, I declare this defense open. Maybe we'll join the audience to see the presentation as well. So.
Custos, honored opponent, members of the audience. Welcome to my thesis defense. I have studied nocturnal primates in Taita Hills, Kenya, and I will now shortly present you what is the basically the defense part of this PhD. So it is based on 4 articles that are all already published. They have been published in Diversity, in Scientific Reports, Mammalian Biology, and then International Journal of Primatology. And as you can see, they all have several co-authors, so I'm just not presenting my work. It's also a teamwork, what we have done here. So, just to show you where Taita Hills is located, it's in Kenya. It's around equator, and these forests that are left in Taita Hills, they are only tiny fragments on the mountain tops. And if you calculate all the fragments together, you get 8 square kilometers, and you know that it's not much. And even these 8 square kilometers is divided to 20 different forest fragments. So biggest fragments are what you can see here. There is Bololo, and then there is Gangao, which are the biggest ones, and these are the fragments where I've been mainly working. I also want to show you this map about Eastern Arc Mountains, because Taita Hills is the northern part of Eastern Arc Mountains, and as we are also talking about taxonomy and other features of these animals, we need to think about like where are the other possibly populations or species belonging. So these Eastern Arc Mountains, they are one of the hotspots areas of the biodiversity. There are a lot of endemic species in each of these. We can discuss about single point endemism, because if you don't think that it's land, you can see that they are like islands. So they are like islands separated by savannas and agricultural lands, and these animals that are dependent on forest, they cannot go to another place anymore. So they all have been isolated to their small fragments. And in this map, it does look like there's lots of forest left, but this map is like a great lie. There's only tiny fragments left on each of them. You have to drive hours to get from one to the next, and when you get there, you might only find like 2 hectares, and that's even mixed with exotics. So the situation in these mountains is absolutely critical if you think about the conservation of the animals. So this is very important to know, and also to see, like, when you think about this whole issue. So here are some pictures from the Taita Hills. So these last forests are located around the mountaintops where the hills are so steep that it cannot be farmed. So that's why it has stayed there. And many of the hills have anyway burned because people like to make fires over them. In the forest, so what I've been doing is I've been in the forest at night with red lights, thermal imaging camera, trying to follow these animals, taking pictures of them and figuring out how they live, because we practically didn't know anything about these animals when I started. But this forest is an amazing place at night. So when we use red light, it's so beautiful. So these last fragments that are indigenous forest, primary forest, I mean forest that has never been logged, it's amazingly beautiful, and each night something really special happens, and you can never know in advance what will happen because it will always be a surprise. So I've been really privileged to be there. Even the rats look yellow in the red light, and there are really big rats in this forest, which is super nice for me. Of course, the canopy reaches 50 meters, so it's quite high. And also the plant diversity is, of course, high. That's why it's a hotspot area, and our St. Paulia also grows there. So first we'll start with the dwarf galagos. So first we found them from Gangao, and there's only less than 10 individuals left. Then it took weeks for me to find these dwarfs in Bololo. Of course we could hear them, but taking a picture was much more challenging. So what they do is they are just tiny, and they feed on insects. So they jump from one tree to another, and they usually catch the insect in the midpoint of their jump. They're really amazing animals. When you see one, you are thinking like, can this be real? Because they are so extraordinary. We may come back to these later on. I just want to keep the time, but basically what in the field, what we compare is the sounds, because each species have different calls, and then we can locate them from these calls, and we can also study their taxonomy from these calls. I might play one of them at least, so that you get an idea what they sound like. So that was the sound of a dwarf galago from Bololo forest. And this is Gangao. And then we get Diani Beach. So based on our analysis, it seems that the dwarf in the Taita Hills might be the same one that lives in the coastal forest of the Kenya, but we haven't. If that is the case, then we could describe it as a subspecies, because there's no possibility of them ever meeting each other again. It's 160 kilometers dry savanna, so they will not be coming together anymore. But however, we are not still sure whether it's a different species. We would need a DNA sample, but getting a DNA sample from an animal that is tiny and lives at the canopy of the forest, it's very, very difficult. But I hope that it happens at some point, because the conservation money is often tied to the assessment of the International Union of Conservation, and if something is critically endangered, it's much more easier to make some conservation action for that species. I have also, since that, I have also tried to locate, and I've been finding them, of course, in other dwarf galagos that are living in Tanzania and Kenya, because for me, if I want to understand if the dwarf in Taita Hills is a different species, I need to know what the others are like. How could I know if they are different if I don't know what the other species are like? And now, as I move on, I hope that you get we don't have time to go over all of these calls, but I don't know about the honorable opponent. We might come back. I'll try to make it fast, but you might hear them all at the same time. Sorry. Okay. We have it. Yes. So, as we are moving on from the dwarves to another species, I just want to say again that there is only less than 10 individuals in Gangao, and this year we haven't found them at all. I hope we find them, that they have just relocated, but the forest is only like 1 square kilometer, so there are not that many places for them to go. But let's hope that we get them back. I have also studied these greater galagos, also known as bush babies. And in Taita Hills, these are surprising animals. They are generalists. They're like foxes. They can eat basically anything. But it seems that they have quite a big diversity on their looks, on their coloring, on their behavior, and on their size. And this has been really fascinating to see, but to me it seems that they can move in the cities, but usually the black ones. And they are quite aggressive and fast, and they respond quickly. They come to feed underneath the lamps, so they are quite adaptive. And then when you are in the forest, what you usually see is this big whitish thing that feeds on insects and prefers to live peacefully. So this is something that is very interesting on this species, and how this diversity in the genotype is probably going on as a diversity and capability to adapt to the all these changes that humans are causing in this area. So they are fine. They don't have to. Of course, people are causing problems for them. So they are being killed, and they get run by cars and killed by dogs. But in general, they are doing quite fine. And then we go to tree hyrax, which I didn't know at all when I started to do my PhD. Here's a short video of this animal. So, one of the articles was about how tree hyraxes adapt to living on these forest fragments of different sizes. Taita Hills has quite nice variety of different sizes of fragments, so I had these bigger fragments and with the smaller fragments, and as you can see, it really goes down the population size when the forest fragment becomes smaller. And also on those small fragments, they also tend to try to call at the times when people are not around. There has been poaching on these places. Then I wanted to study how this one group of tree hyraxes that lived in a particularly nice environment where the trees are 50 meters tall. So this one group of tree hyraxes, they may call between 1,500 to 2,500 times a night. So these are really actively calling animals, and it should be that there must be something that they're saying because they are using so much energy to do it. And as this seemed, that to me it seems that it's a nice way to study tree hyraxes, which are extremely difficult to find, to study if their population size is like healthy and livable. But in order for you to do this from recordings, you have to understand how the acoustic communication changes between seasons and during the night. So here you have different months and how they call during different months. So they call less during rain, and also the times when it's really dry, they call a little bit less. They usually call a lot just at 7 when the evening begins, and then they may call more around 5 a.m. But then there might be these random calling periods anytime. They also prefer to call when the moon is not full. So during the full moon they call less. Perhaps there was this ghost from the past, this big predator that used to eat them. Here we have like a yearly clock for them. So the singing, which is really interesting phenomenon, is most common in January, February and May. It may be related to their reproduction, so the males will sing when it's really like the best time to advertise. So this study was the first one that recorded calls singing from tree hyraxes. And what is interesting is that rock hyraxes also sing. We know that other tree hyrax species don't sing, but the ones that we have in Taita Hills, they do. And now it's going to probably be a horrible noise. We have to jump with the time, so I have to just quickly, or maybe we'll skip this and get back passively with the opponent. So for the tree hyraxes, because we think that the species in Taita Hills are new species for science, again I have traveled around Kenya and Tanzania to find tree hyraxes, recording their calls to find out if they are indeed endemic. These tree hyraxes, anywhere I go, I usually find a population that is almost extinct. And the conservation status for these tree hyraxes is near threatened. So I have not found any populations that is like near threatened. I've only found critically endangered and the ones who live in the safety of Kilimanjaro Big National Park. But other than that, what we usually find is these tiny forest fragments where they are living as they can. They may live in the holes underneath the ground. They can go into some garages or something, but they need a shelter during the day when it's hot. And that is, as humans have cut down all the big trees, they are in serious trouble because of that. So tree hyrax conservation is really lagging behind because these UCN criteria for assessment of the endangeredness, it depends on much of it. It depends on the population size, and we don't know how much are there. So then it's like it's just a guess. And then we have these maps where the forests are gigantic when in reality it's tiny. So they are not accurate when we discuss about nocturnal species, and this means that they are neglected in conservation, and this is a serious matter. So now, honored opponent, Professor. Honored opponent, Professor Jörg Ganzhorn. I now call upon you to present your critical comments on my dissertation.
Thank you. Honored custos, honored Rikkinen, Hanna, ladies and gentlemen. Well, first I would really like to thank you for your very nice presentation. I think it gave us a good overview and impression about what the system is about some of the problems you might have encountered. I'm sure you did not describe all of them, or actually you didn't describe any of them, and I'm sure there were plenty. As you described at the beginning of your presentation, your work has been published now in four publications in international journals, in good journals. So that's a major achievement to have something like this already at the end of your basically of your field work, of your time of analysis, and that's really a major achievement. But it certainly also means that what you just presented us with these very nice pictures is just we're just scraping the surface of your work. And I think we now can start the discussion, and you can explain us more about what you really do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Sorry, can you hear me, or do you need this?
Yeah, push it just to the green.
Oh, now it's green. Do you need the green, or is it? Doesn't it matter? It's good. It's better. Okay. Well, I was told that we should basically start from the very beginning and then just go on as things develop. And when I first received your thesis, I expected something completely different, to be honest. And my first question would be, why did you choose this title?
Well, that is a good question. It used to be a different title, but it's well, we did behavioral ecology, and conservation was all the time the main focus, the reason why we do this, and this is why I wanted to have the conservation in it. And yes, we are very much interested on their behavior as well, so I guess this is what it's settled, but I'm also interested to hear, like, what should it be?
Yeah, well, the reason why I really stumbled over this, I think you are selling your thesis undervalue with this title, because what you really did is you used this acoustic method to really understand or come to a better understanding what the animals really do and what they want. And this passive acoustic monitoring, and in your case the active acoustic monitoring, that's a field that has developed over the last 40, 50 years. I remember, actually by coincidence, doctorand of mine in Tübingen, I think he was the first who proposed to use acoustic monitoring for biodiversity assessment. This was somewhere in the 80s. And he was first laughed about, and the whole thing was forgotten, and it came back 20, 30 years later, and really developed into a completely new field with a lot of potential. And the question then I would like to ask, maybe can you explain us more what this type of acoustic monitoring can be used for and is being used for? You mentioned it very briefly in passing,
Yes.
but I think can you give us some examples of what it is used for?
Well, I actually had bioacoustics in the beginning at the title, but then I thought that, okay, it's just a method, that why should we have it there? And I took it off, but yes, I think that this bioacoustic is excellent way to study animal behavior. It's a way to find these rare species that are difficult to find at all. Like you can cover great areas that you don't have to stand there yourself. You can just put these tiny recorders all around and leave them recording for long periods of time, and this is how you can find species that you couldn't otherwise. And also these days with the development of artificial intelligence, it's possible to go over these recordings without you actually sitting. But what I've been doing is I've been actually sitting and seeing every minute of my recordings. We have been using it a lot for taxonomical purposes because you can compare them and figure out, is this a different taxon or what? What I would like to use it is to, because with tree hierarchies, to me it seems that they all have individual signatures in their calls. I would like to be able to identify individuals from their calls to be able to know how many, how big is the population size, because this at the moment we don't really know how many animals there is, and like I said, it's a critical question in these assessments.
Okay, what would you do? A critical type of information is really the density or the number of animals that are still around. Can you think of how would you, if you would have to do a study on defining the number of animals in a forest based on this acoustic monitoring, how would you do this? And especially how would you do this if you are dealing with an animal, with a species that does not have individual core characteristics?
There is a method that where you have to place, like perhaps let's say like you have a certain area and you place there 30 audio mods, these tiny recorders, and then you need to make this software that calculates the distance, because the different recorders will, the sound will arrive to different recorders at slightly different times. So this is how you can locate the calling animal, and then you know how many animals are calling. But of course you don't know how many are silent. So it's not like easy method to use. And of course calculating all this takes quite a lot of IT skills to do. So.
Yeah, no, certainly, I mean, there's always some kind of error, but well, we have been monitoring and assessing population densities of nocturnal lemurs in Madagascar for decades, and we assume that our estimates are off by an order of magnitude. So it's not knowing whether there are 10 or 20, but it's a question whether there are 10 or 100, and maybe even higher than this. So I think this, you only can do better than this. And if you have a more sophisticated method, and as you said, with the artificial intelligence, there, I think there's a completely new field that's developing and opening up. And also what you just said is that it's very difficult to monitor an animal that doesn't say anything. And you also mentioned that predation might be a problem for many of these animals. Do you have an idea how you could quantify predation, or even know whether there's predation going on?
I have been thinking about that. So when the population size goes low, then the animals start to vocalize differently, and then you can think of reasons why are they being predated by humans or other. But then, like with dwarf calicos, I think the problem is the owls hunting them. And I have observed this in many different places, and to me they don't seem to really they don't seem to avoid them enough. Because the dwarf calico is looking down. It's maybe in 1 meter height, and it's looking down for the grasshoppers and things, and then the owl is up there, so the dwarf is not looking at the direction where the hunter is coming from.
Okay, but talking about owls, can you think of a method how you can find out whether these owls really hunt these calicos, whether the galapagos are part of their diet or not, apart from just watching?
It's very hard. We have watched it a few times that we have actually witnessed them hunting, but these forests are so multi-structured that finding any kind of remains is practically impossible.
Also, there's no chance of finding an owl nest or roost?
No, it's the forest is too high.
Okay, do you have barn owls in the area?
I have never seen what is like this very, very, very common owl is African wood owl. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
And of course we hear it calling. It has a very nice call. And what I've seen is that they do like to hang out at the door of territories.
No, but you don't find the nests?
No.
Of the sets?
No, I've never seen it.
Okay.
Of course, if we did, then we would search for the bones and whatever remains. We would be so happy to find it.
How about, well, maybe that's quite a detour, and we'll come back to this later on. How about eagles? Do you find a nest of eagles or of other raptors?
No, we've never seen them either.
Would it be possible to do this? I mean, we eventually at some stage I employed something like 50 people to look for owl nests, and we found 2. But it really provides a lot of information, and it's worth the effort. So maybe you can.
I think that's a really good idea because there are there's a lot of people doing bird research there. They might even know already. We know them, but we haven't talked about this. They don't really study birds, but other species because there are these endemic birds in Taita Hills and their work is mostly focused on them. But they might, because they go over, they know like everything. They might know this.
And you also described that your animals, sorry, I think these are your animals now, that when they are living in different conditions, they adapt the vocalizations to these conditions, also over evolutionary times. And the question is, how can you distinguish between intersite or intraspecific variation of core characteristics, and when would you call the difference to be, or consider a difference to be large enough to say these are 2 different species?
I jumped it, or maybe I can show this with the dwarves, because it's an interesting question, and this is something that I have thought about a lot. So maybe this is, let's see. Now we're going to the beginning, sorry. Let's go back. Here. So here we have different species of dwarves. So how this goes, if I just stand up for a moment so that I can show you. So we have this rondo dwarf, which is so we have rondo dwarf. This is tiny, 60 grams, and here is the call recorded, and you can see these 1 units, and it's a you can hear it that it's a tiny animal. Then we have a mountain dwarf called Orinus, which is pictured here. So that one has like calls like pairs. You have these 2-unit combinations and 3-unit combination, and that goes on. And this one sounds like the dog toy, you know, whining dog toy. It's also a tiny animal, about 100 grams. And then with this Kenya coast dwarf colourwood that resembles so much the Taita animals, it has these pairs, but then the end is incremental, so it grows towards the end. Zanzibar dwarf colourwood, this is also really easy to recognize because it's a rolling call, so all these units are just as powerful, and it's only 1, so it goes like rock, rock, rock. Maybe I'll show that. We can listen to all of these if we want. Or maybe we'll go. started from the beginning. Anyway, so then we have, this is Uchung Wensi, so it's Zanzibar calico, but it lives further south in Tanzania. And what these recent DNA studies show that these are actually the same species. And then Mozambique dwarf calico, which is the biggest one of all, it's a scaling call, so it begins slowly, it increases and then it winds down again, and these units are quite tightly packed.
Oh, sorry. I didn't want to interrupt.
Just say.
So, but where would the individual variation come in? And well, if you now look at the Zanzibar dwarf calico on the mainland and in Zanzibar, well,
Exactly.
you could sell them as two different species, but I mean,
Yes.
they look different to me.
Of course, and this is the problem, because if I think each individual they have a vocal repertoire. It's not like the individual is always giving the same call. So there are differences between, I guess, the moods and needs of the animal at the moment. So they can use different types of calls, and then it's basically up to the whoever listens to this to make the judgment. But of course, Orinus this mountain dwarf calico, it will always sound like a dog toy. So when you listen to them long enough, like Simon Weirder, one of the supervisors, have done, then it starts to make sense, and you start to learn it. And then if you talk with these primatologists who have been working for dwarf calico taxonomy, they can do it quite easily.
Would genetics help you with this type of?
Yes, I think this needs genetics.
No, I would say no. What would be the difference between your approach and the genetic approach? Or why do you think that genetics will give you a better answer? Because geneticists are more convincing and they have a lot of confidence in themselves, and they have been telling us for years and decades now that they are the greatest. So I hope there's not that many geneticists in the room. Is this really the case, or do we simply think that genetics is a solution to everything because we have been told that it's a solution to everything?
Well, of course, genetics is also, there's no straight boundary that we have a species here and then we have species. It's not that simple. But, like this one individual may give like 30 different types of calls depending on these various things on its life. And there's only one DNA. So.
Okay, but do you know the difference between the phylogenetic and the biological species concept?
No.
Okay, no, that's perfect. Well, or do you know, what is a species, do you know?
Yeah, the thing is with this, also with the problem with these calls and the forest, is that the forest of Ganga and Bololo, they have been separated for perhaps 600,000 years or even more. Mm-hmm. So it's a quite long time. Species may develop during that period. And the calls from Bololo and Ganga are different also. And then, like, where do you draw the line? Do you just say that it's because of the different environment? You can easily explain that the acoustic, and you can even hear it, that the acoustics in Ganga and Bololo are different. It's hard to explain how they are different, but they are different, and also the animals are calling differently. So.
I think your answer is great, I think, because that's exactly, that you don't know the difference between the phylogenetic and biological species concept, but you basically described it very well. So you don't need to know everything, but you have the brain to think about it. And the phylogenetic species concept, you simply use the evolutionary history, and then you define splits, and basically in terms of genetics, you say, well, if these two forms are different by X numbers of genetic substitutions or differences, then it's a new species. And that's completely arbitrary. So, and you could, well, not completely, but I might be biased a little bit, but it's not that different from your situation. You only have to define some kind of difference, and then you say that's a different species. And the biological species concept is basically units that do not reproduce with other units are considered a species, which is a bit a problematic concept if you are working with museum specimens, because reproduction is kind of a problem then. But that's what it basically means is you have some kind of heritable trait that is then transferred into the next generation and leads to the separation of species or forms, and then you have a new species. So this was the traditional view that has been promoted mainly by Ernst Mayr. Have you heard of well, it's rather recent actually, of a situation where a new species evolved as we look at it in the last couple of years in birds? No. Well, this also came to my mind when I read the thesis. You know Galapagos finches, and it's a very interesting situation because that must have been probably not that recent, must have been something like 30, 40 years ago, when Peter and Rosemary Grant they've been studying Galapagos finches all their life. And during some kind of storm, a species or an individual male from a distant island was basically swarmed into Daphne nature, into one of the other islands, and bred with one of these Galapagos finches. I think it was major, but it doesn't really matter. So it was just one animal that hybridized, and then the offspring, they only learned, or they were most exposed to the song of their father, and as a consequence, they only, not exclusively, but almost interbred later on with their siblings. So, and this was, I think that's the only, but most convincing case where you have a difference in a vocal trait that led to speciation, and it's not something that is of immediate adaptive advantage to these finches, but only that's what they know, that's what they heard. So they stay within their group, and that's this associative mating, these animals do. Could you imagine that something like this also happens in your primate? I mean, it's speculation, it's probably nothing you can say much about.
I would doubt it, because they are already at the brink of extinction. It's not like we are expecting them to start growing fast. It's more like, will they survive at all? But if taken into this gigantic forest with all the resources that we need, of course there would be a bottleneck, and then it would probably be another direction afterwards.
Well, then, looking at your graph, since it's up there already, I was also kind of surprised by the low frequency these animals are calling. They are small animals, and I don't know much about primate vocalizations, but our Myosiebus, our small lemurs, which look exactly like your dwarf galagos, they have calling frequencies in the ultrasound range, and especially your smallest rattle has the deepest voice, which is kind of surprising. And I'm wondering whether you missed some part of the vocal spectrum of the.
Well, I've done. The problem is I've done the recordings also up to 100 kilohertz.
Oh, okay, but you didn't get anything?
No, but of course, this is a highly populated forest with Orthoptera. I could show you this graph that I didn't use as I was giving my speech. I found this very interesting because it shows that the species that I was studying, tree hyraxes, autolemurs and dwarf galagos, they all have their, like the main information in their call is located underneath this chorus of insects that is so loud in the forest that they could not compete with that because it's very high. Actually, the tree hyraxes can compete with that because they can go over it. They can call for more than 100 decibels, but even they choose to have their main message underneath the
Okay.
So I can also show it from here so you can see how powerful it is. So here this is the insect chorus in the forest.
Yeah.
So if you are a small dwarf calico, you wouldn't want to call here because nobody would hear it.
How far do these calls travel in the forest?
It's very hard to say because, of course, we sometimes see the calling animal, but we don't know. And of course, it always depends on many different factors like forest structure and the temperature and the possible wind and so on. So we can't know. But I would say that for the dwarf calico to be heard, you would be like 15, 20 meters.
Okay, do you know whether low frequencies or high frequencies travel further in the forest?
I've seen papers regarding this, but I can't say that I would agree with those rules that they have come up with because to me it seems that they have made their own rules, these animals, and they are using, all of these are using these vertical type of calls, so perhaps the call that has a shape like this can go further in this highly challenging environment.
Okay. Well, since now it's gone, but it's still there. Can you go one slide? Yeah, right, this one. So calls are calls are there to communicate, I assume. And so from our understanding and what you describe is that these calls are adapted to a certain environment, and if you go to a different environment, it's likely to be different because you have to just fulfill certain requirements. What I was found very, very interesting is that at dawn you have a complete different spectrum of calls.
Yes.
Is it? But it's the same environment. So
Yeah.
somebody makes a mistake. The nocturnal ones or the diurnal ones, or what is the?
I don't. It's just. This is the moment that everybody would have a chance to go into the tropical forest. We're just doing this shift of, it's like night shift, and then we have a day shift, and it happens just like you can see it here. It happens almost in few minutes. You have these nocturnal animals calling. You can have tree hyraxes singing just, and then the sun comes up, which happens quite fast in Africa. Or it starts, there's like click, and then the night shift fades away, is silent, and then the birds will begin.
But wouldn't it be good? Well, if I were a bird, I would sing at the frequency, let's say, of night shift, because nobody else is singing there, and then everybody hears me.
Yeah, but they don't. So they don't have to compete with these orthopterans insects.
Oh, it's the orthopteran that are.
Yeah. So they are doing the night. So the night shift have to go below it. But then when they stop, and what I was asking, actually, I studied this in one of the papers because I was looking for that. Would the animals call more? Because the insects, they start to get possibly tired during towards the morning, so they don't. It's not that loud. You can see it here. That there is this part here. There are actually minutes and longer, even hours sometimes of silence. So I was looking for that. Will the tree hyraxes use that vacancy in this acoustic window? But they don't. They don't mind. They don't react to this orthopterans.
Do you know? Actually, I can't think of an example right now. But maybe do you have two different? Maybe hyraxes. Yeah, why not hyraxes? Because there you have the rock hyrax and you have the tree hyrax. One is nocturnal, the other one is diurnal. Do they go in different frequencies? Does the diurnal one is more like a bird and the nocturnal one is more like a nocturnal one?
I haven't studied the rock hyrax calls. I haven't looked at the spectrograms, but the singing was surprisingly similar. And I think that if we could get the taxonomy of the genetics, we might find that these tree hyraxes in Taita Hills may be closer to the rock hyraxes than they are actually for the Dendrohyrax arboreus, which is the one that lives in Nairobi and other areas. So there's similarities between these.
Okay, can you maybe go back to the first or last slide? I mean, just one of the slides with the, yeah, right, this one. If you look at the ears of the dwarf lemur, and they have huge ears, do they use them for some kind of echolocation or to locate prey? Or?
Yes, they are locating prey with them. You can see when they hunt, their ears go different directions, and inside the ears there are these formations that probably help them to locate themselves.
Okay, but is it, well, some of you certainly don't know, and I think nobody knows, but is there anything like echolocation? Or do they just look for sound, or they just like to see sounds from the insects?
I think this is the question that should be studied in zoo, because in the forest we don't know if there is a call that we don't know from the previously, or we haven't seen it. How do we know who is giving the call? Because there's so many bats in the forest, for example, and nobody doesn't. It's not even know all the species of bats. So how can I say that this is a dog when it's a bat, and it could be a frog, it could be an insect. So doing it in a controlled environment would be the first step to start finding them.
But do you have maybe now that's jumping a bit, but do you know or have an explanation why we have so many cryptic species, nocturnal species, compared to the diurnal ones?
Yes, this is something that Simon Bearder has worked a lot on. So basically in the forest at night, when the animals can't see each other, why would they look different? They don't have any need for the recognition of species based on how the different species look like, so that's how they identify each other from their calls. And this is why the calls are diverse, even though the animals look very much the same, and are in fact almost impossible to tell apart by just looking for these dwarf calicos, for example. But from the calls, it's far more.
It's easy. Can easily see.
Yeah.
Okay. but maybe let's move on to the hierarchies, because I found the most interesting. Well, you describe, or it's known that hierarchies are related to elephants and dugongs or manatees. How on earth does an elephant get the idea that now I climb a tree in the foliage?
Yes.
How do they do this?
Who knows? But there used to be a lot of hyraxes. Like 36 million years ago, there were hyraxes that were big, and there were hyraxes that were small. And ever since these antelopes that are now very common, they start to speciate fast. The hyraxes only had the species that the others couldn't keep, and perhaps that was one of the reasons why they climbed up. So what is fascinating about them is how they toes. You can't really see them in this picture, but they're pads. So they have only these small 3 toes in the front feet, but they have pads that keep them. So it's like these pads that keep them in the tree. They have nails like us, so they cannot really climb like that. But these pads are like a marvelous thing.
Is there anything known about predation on rock hyraxes?
On rock hyraxes?
No.
I don't know that much about rock hyraxes, but I think they are predated by some birds and also some mammals. In Taita Hills, there are not many predators left that can take out the grown tree hyrax. There are genets, but genet may take a baby, but not these fully grown. They actually have a quite big teeth, so it's not like an easy prey. So.
And do you have an idea why they have become nocturnal?
Possibly to avoid predation.
No.
That's the likely reason that there used to be these bigger birds flying in African sky, and there probably is, if I would go deep down to it, I could even find like research on it, but there must have been.
Do you know a diurnal bird of prey that is predating on these, this type of family? And also on
I don't think there any more is that big bird, at least in Taita Hills. There are these big eagles in Africa, but I have never seen them in Taita Hills.
The Stephanoides, do you know what that exist there? Stephanoides? No. Well, there's an eagle that captures these arboreal primates in Africa, and that's why I think there's so much to be learned from the remains of. Is this a sign that shut up?
No, definitely not.
Yeah. No. Yeah, okay. And they catch their prey. So they're going after mainly these frugivorous, group-living primates in canopy, and so they catch the animal. So I don't want to use this.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Come in. Like this. And what this means is, with the posterior claw, it just goes through the scapula, and it leaves very distinct holes in the scapula. And these holes can be, if you even just simply find the skeleton or the remains of one of these prey items, you can then say, well, that's this type of predator must have been there. And I could imagine that if you decide to become arboreal, you are defending, why What's the advantage of being arboreal compared to live on the rocks?
Well, these hyraxes certainly need the safety from the trees. Of course, they also accept rocks for that matter, but they need this hole. Somewhere has to be a hole because hyraxes, they have really poor ability to regulate their body temperature. So they need to use outside temperature to regulate inside temperature. So they need something. So, but what I've seen is that tree hyraxes actually don't always need to be arboreal. They can also be on the ground and they can also be in the small bushes, but they can never live without this place of shelter. And many times I've seen tree hyraxes sleeping really soundly, like you can almost hear them snore.
No.
And you can be close by and you can see how it peacefully sleeps. So possibly this diet, which is consisting only leaves, it's not really healthy. It contains a lot of toxins also, so they need to be resting a lot.
Okay, yes and no, maybe. You describe extremely high densities of these tree hyraxes. And I think you go up to, you say something of between 0 and 13 animals per hectare, and there was another quote of 17 animals per hectare.
I haven't given these numbers. I think they are based from some other people. We didn't give numbers because how could we know any numbers? It's just
but then assume that these other people are not completely wrong. You just have they occur in high densities.
yes.
You would a similar sized animal living on the ground in these forests be able to reach similar densities?
No,
And why not?
there's no food.
Okay, good. So it's probably the food that
Of course, that's what they eat. They only eat leaves.
Okay, so and then if you eat leaves, you have to go up in the canopy.
Yes.
And if you go up in the canopy during the day, then there's an eagle that grabs you. And then it has to become nocturnal.
Of course, yes.
It's
This is what I think happened. Yes.
Okay.
But they still, it's not like they are not completely nocturnal. They do move out and they feed during the day, and they bask in the sun if it's a nice day, if they wish to do so. And there are differences between populations. Some populations call during the day, and some populations do not. And it's I think sometimes it's related to the poaching, so that in the areas where there are a lot of tree hyraxes and poaching, they will tell each other, they keep in contact so that somebody can tell the whole group that, okay, poachers are coming, be aware of this. But in Taita Hills, I only heard them once during the day, so usually they just wait for the night and then they start to call.
Mm-hmm. You describe also that these animals form metapopulations.
Yeah, groups.
But do you know what a metapopulation
Yes.
is? What is this?
Well, this is a theory that was actually developed here in Helsinki by Jouko Rikkinen, and I've read many of his papers, and I tried to figure out, because I think this metapopulation theory is something that is happening, of course, with these nocturnal mammals that I want to study. It would be so good to be able to test these theories with these animals, but the problem is that as we don't really know how many animals there are no numbers that we can put into these quite complex calculations. So yes, I think the metapopulation theory is important, but in practice, in these challenging conditions, it's very hard to put it into practice. And also the reality is that if there is a fragment that has some animals and they are destroyed, they will never come back. because they have lost the connection with these fragments, have lost all the connections, and these animals, except for these greater galago, they are poor dispersals. They cannot come back at this stage.
Okay, so I think once they go extinct in one of these fragments, they're
Yes,
gone.
that's fine.
Could you lure them back into these fragments by playing their songs?
They can't
just-
come. It's
it's
densely populated area. Everybody's farming. Everybody has dogs.
Yeah.
So these tree hyraxes that are living in Gangao, they have to disperse into the gardens of people, and there they live as they can. But they probably don't have very long lifespan because they are killed either by people, because they snare them as they go to their field to eat bean leaves or something, or their dogs will kill them. So their dispersal abilities
It's
are
just not possible.
just, yeah.
And you, I found two different types of informations about the use of latrines of your tree hyraxes. I think somewhere I read in your thesis that they simply defecate from the tree, but somebody else in South Africa estimated the density of these animals based on latrines.
Yes.
Do they have different behaviors? Or first,
They do.
what is a latrine?
Well, latrine is so tree hyraxes are extremely clean animals. So if you have a pet tree hyrax, it will use your toilet, and you will have no problem with that. So they, if they are living on the ground, they go and poop always in the same place. And also in Kilimanjaro, Kundaili counted the tree hyrax population based on the latrines. So there seems to be difference between either species or populations. In Taita Hills, they usually just poop from the tree, and then it's gathered into the forest floor. And because of the climate, it doesn't stay long. So only in some locations we have managed to find these piles of poop, because they usually, the hyraxes are animals that they usually have their favorite spot, and they are really loyal for this spot. So they always go to the same spot. And it could be that when one tree hyrax dies, then the other one will take the spot. It's usually like vertical place, because it's a round, and as you can see, it's a slightly like fattish. So they like to sleep on certain places where they don't fall off. They sometimes fall off. So if there's a nice place to sleep, it's populated, and then it just poops from the tree, and then it might end up in a pile. But only when they have these, when they live on the rocks and boulders and cliffs and holes in the rocks, then they have certain place where they always go and poop. I guess they think that it would be too mess if everybody would poop.
Well, maybe, I like your tree hyraxes, I think they're wonderful. But that's for later. Can you imagine some kind of function of these latrines? Or do you know of any other animal that?
There are other animals that do have latrines. Only thing that I can think of now is like llama. But there are animals that use latrines. Actually, even horses do it. At least stallions and even mares do it. I think the one possible connection could be that it's a shared place for all, and it could be slightly related to the communication. But for tree hyraxes, I would mainly say that they're just clean animals, and they don't go sniffing the pile of poop. I don't. Nobody knows. That's the key. Yeah.
No, but I think we have to come back to the original approach. We don't know these animals,
Yes.
and they live in a sensory world that's not our own. And we have this. It's a funny, not funny, but an interesting situation. I never thought that toilet research would be that interesting. But I mean, there are other nocturnal, diurnal, arboreal mammals that live up in the canopy and they come down to the ground and defecate.
Yes.
And then they climb back up.
Yeah,
These
like
are sloths and all kinds of, and lemurs and all kinds of animals. So that's really, and there are difference, and that's why it's so kind of interesting. There's a lot of variation within a species and also between species, but there are also things in common. And these latrines can either be arranged in the center of a home range, and then it seems to be a very strong signal that this place is occupied and that's the most valuable area. And then you have the alternative that's, for example, known from hyenas in Namibia, is if you have a big territory that you cannot defend all the time, you deposit your latrines at the border of your activity range. So there are two different, or several more different possibilities on what to do with the latrine. And it's just that now we have acoustic cues here. There are certainly a lot of olfactory cues, and there it's even worse for us because we don't smell these things.
Yeah, I've seen it in action. So in the back they have these different coloring fur, and if they want to communicate, there is a gland underneath, and it swallows. It swallows so much that it becomes bare. It's bold, and then you can see sprinkling of these, this whatever is this thing that smells is the scent. So I think that the scent that comes from the gland that is on their back is more important on their communication than the toilets. Because if you can use a perfume, why would you use a toilet? It's like much more fancy.
Okay, maybe that's a question of perspective. Yeah, but so are they smelly with their dorsal glands?
No, I don't think it's a bad smell, but I've seen it.
Sorry, I have to ask you this question because I was told that I have to ask you. The colleague is working on hibernation, on torpor, on incomplete thermoregulation, and Aphrodisians are known for this. Have you seen, and what's most interesting is because you use these thermal cameras, many questions. Do you know whether these animals use some kind of torpor to reduce the activity, and they can lower their body temperature and then increase again? And the second question would be, well, maybe the first question first.
Okay. Well, as I have been now following many populations of tree hyraxes, I have started to believe that it's not how they keep themselves warm. Because in Taita Hills, the temperature doesn't change their calling behavior. It can be 10 degrees and they're calling just as much, they are lively and they're just fine. The problem for tree hyrax is most probably the heat, that they cannot get rid of excess heat. And this is why they need those shelters. And this is why they have disappeared from the areas where there are no shelters available. So I wouldn't see them going into this kind of hibernation, because that's not the problem. The problem is how to get rid of the heat.
Do you know, does their body temperature fluctuate over the day?
I don't think anybody knows.
Do you know another example of an animal, of a species, which has a very fluctuating body temperature as an adaptation against heat?
Not like the rock hyraxes, of course, do it, but not.
No, well, okay, yeah, they do it. A bigger animal, very big animal.
Oh yeah, like bears.
No,
You mean?
no. Camels. Camels can really at night lower their body temperature, I think up to, I'm not quite sure, somewhere 33, 34 degrees. And then during the day, the body temperature can go up to 42 degrees, which is very, very hot. But it certainly means you can get, or they can spend a long time of the day without having to thermoregulate. It costs a lot of energy in the water. And this would be a perfect, or not a perfect, but it would be a good adaptation to cope with increasing with high temperatures, because then simply you get warmer and night will come and then you can cool off. But that's probably not what these small
I think they would
animals
need that.
do.
Yeah.
And would you be, in case they would do this, would you be able to see differences in body temperature with your thermal camera from a distance? Let's say
Basically, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you can see the body temperature differences from the cameras, because of course some areas are red. And you could actually study that probably because the zoos in Czech have these 3 hierarchies.
Yeah.
So that's a study that could be done in a zoo more easily than in the forest.
Do you know whether the Galapagos do something like this, like going into torpor or hibernation?
No, I have no knowledge of
No.
it. But yes, we have no knowledge. But the one thing that we can say that it's a difference between the dwarfs in Taita Hills and the dwarfs in the Kenyan coast is that the ones living on the mountains, they have much more bigger and thicker fur. Probably they have adapted to these cold conditions, because in the coastal Kenya it's always 25 degrees.
Yeah.
So
But that's also a very interesting field, because again, in Madagascar we have many animals that have this torpor. So there's mouse lemurs and other lemurs, and some of them even hibernate for several months. So that's a hibernating primate, which is very interesting. And so we tried to see whether Galapagos do the same, and but didn't find anything except for, and it was pure coincidence and luck. A student found in South Africa from Galago Mahori to go into torpor, so they really shut down their metabolism and get cold, but only if the situation is getting really very, very bad. So no food and cold weather, and they would need to spend a lot of energy to maintain their activity. And under these conditions, they do it. So, which is again was interesting, because obviously they can do it, but they don't do it. So if they are living in an area like yours, where you have a more stable temperature, it doesn't get very cold. And it's probably not needed.
10 degrees is the lowest.
Yeah, that's too warm. I mean, it's still quite
It's
cold.
too high.
Okay, I have another, maybe a very nasty question, but it's okay. There was a study by a group or publication from Miller that used niche modeling to model the distribution, the pseudo distribution area for dwarf animals. And you conclude that, their model was able to describe the distribution of the dwarf galapagos along the coast pretty well, but your animals fell out of it, and the habitats you find the animals in would qualify as not being prime habitat for these animals.
This is because actually the contacted me and told me this, that did you know that we did this study and your dwarfs did not fit, that otherwise it was fine, but the Taita dwarfs didn't fit and that's why it's in the thesis.
Do you know how these niche models are being developed?
No, I don't know.
Okay. Or could you, I mean, basically what people do is they take abiotic or abiotic measurements and then simply check where does an animal occur, where does a species occur, and then they extrapolate from there to other areas. And what I was wondering is, do you know or have an idea, probably nobody knows, but do you have an idea about the evolution of these dwarf galgos? I mean, you have the East African arc, and the East African arc is considered a biodiversity hotspot, so it has many endemic species. How did these endemic species get there? Did they evolve in the ark, or did they evolve elsewhere and only found a refuge in the ark?
This, of course, I don't know, does anybody really know, but of course this also kind of goes back to the human evolution. So before 5 million years ago, there were big forests, and it must have been magnificent over there because the forests were wide and animals were moving freely from areas to another. And then this drying up began, which also led to the human development and us standing up and having no hair. And then these animals and plants became isolated, and then they have developed into possibly different species, or
well, if you develop this further, which population is the good population, and which population is the bad population?
I don't think there are no like bad or good populations. They are just. But I've seen differences if we think about the hierarchies. I think that I've been studying acoustic communication. So to me, after recording all these populations also in Tanzania and in Kenya, it seems that these the Taita Hills tree hierarchies, they have more competition on who gives the most fanciest call. They do that also in Kilimanjaro, but in a little bit less extent, and then in the other areas the call becomes really, really basic. So who knows where they all began?
No, sorry, I was thinking about these dwarf lemurs and the niche model, and because from what you described, could it be possible that, I'm not saying good and bad now, but original and derived population, the better term, from not knowing much about the area, but having learned a lot from the thesis, and from what you just said, if these animals evolved in a forested area, in more humid conditions, and now you have large populations along the coast, large populations, with a much wider distribution, and you have your tiny remnants of forest sitting on top of the hill. I would, my first hypothesis would be that these remnant populations in the moist forest are the original populations, and then they spread over. Also, we're able to use the dry forests, and the dry forests are still there, and the moist forests are very much reduced. But I would conclude that your population is the original one, and the population studied by Miller and his colleagues with this niche modeling, that's a derived population. So I would simply turn the argument around.
I think that what you say is completely right, and this is what I also think, but it's a little bit like you said, good and bad. We cannot do grading and we have no evidence, just like intuition.
Well, it brings us a bit to the. Can I go on? Of course. Sorry. This brings us a bit to conservation and niche modeling and habitat modeling and all these things. Because I see a very niche modeling is a very common tool in conservation, and it's used heavily to predict which areas might still be suitable for species and which may not. And personally, I think there's a very sometimes a very big error in the method itself, because the method uses the current information of the distribution of an animal, of a species, and then models this, because models are good because they are theoretically and you use computers, and that's different from going to a museum and looking at the stuff. So it's more valuable, definitely, from what people think. And then you model it with statistics nobody understands, and then it's a wonderful model, and it's completely wrong. And then you use this as a basis for conservation decisions. So that's maybe getting sidetracked a bit.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that all this should be based on fieldwork, being there in that environment with these animals, with the local people, because that's the only way how you can really understand what is going on. But in general, all the patches of indigenous forest in East Africa should be protected areas. There's so little of them.
Well, since we have the mention of conservation in the title, I think, what would be your suggestion? What should be done, what could be done to protect these animals better? And also, if we go back to the dwarf galagos that seem to be most threatened, I mean, they occur in the gardens along the beach, and I think there's so many problems in there. And would that be good to set up gardens in the area where these animals would live happily?
Yes, I think it's always a local question, but basically I think in Africa what we have been discussing is that this approach from bottom up that you cannot just plant trees and think that everything is okay, because the people are there who live there and they make the decisions, and it's really, but they can really chop down the tree really fast. You spend 20 years of growing it, and then somebody chops it down in 5 minutes. So teaching the young people mainly and doing things with them, I think that's super important, and it's also really laborious. Nobody can do it alone, but I think it has to go from bottom up, because we older people, we already have made up our mind. It's really hard to change our point of view, but when you are young, you are still interested and you're willing to learn. So this is what we've been doing in Taita Hills. We've been going to schools, planting trees with the kids, or actually the students have been planting the trees, and it's their job to take care of them. And I think that may, in the long run, be of course it's too small scale to have an effect at this point, but I think that it has to be including the local people. We cannot just say what they should be doing. We have to do it with them, helping them, but it has to be there.
Okay. Do you in the Amazon, local farmers, small-scale farmers, in some areas they plant valuable trees, timber trees, and for later as kind of savings. So they have not many, 1, 2, 3, depends a bit on the size of the property, of these trees growing there. And certainly in the Amazon, some trees grow quicker than in the drier parts of the world. And then they chop them down when they need the money, if they send kids to school or to university or something like this. Would this be an option for, you described last night, this different perception of the value of a tree, but a timber tree is a very valuable resource, it costs a lot of money, but would this be an option to promote agroforestry?
Yeah, this is what we've been doing so far, is that there are these indigenous trees that are planted that we know are already popular with these animals and important for them. And then along with them you can plant timber trees and also fruit trees. And this is a way that we try to create this win-win situation for people and also for these animals, that we could get them all. Because we know that mixed forest is not that bad. These animals will benefit and soil and climate and water. It's all connected.
And could you, well, I'm really sorry, I simply don't know enough about the area. You said that the main forest fragments are very, very far away. So, but would this then serve more like a buffer zone around the main forest extent with the main forest fragments? Or could this also be used to establish some kind of corridor?
Yes.
Because with your 100, 120 or 200 hectare forests, you will run into some kind of injury problems sooner or later.
Yes. The problem is that of course all of these ideas are good. So what we have just so far started is just to try to increase the size of Gangao. There has been plans and efforts to connect Gangao with Burja. Pura. Another forest anyway. There was a connection, but it's really difficult. Growing trees, I have been asking, and maybe if somebody knows can tell me, I've been looking for the tree that is actually has been planted and is big enough that you can call it a tree. Because getting those trees to stay alive until they are big enough to survive on their own is a big challenge. There has been a lot of efforts on reforestation, but these seedlings tend to die. And that's why in the plan that we are doing, the school kids are responsible for watering them, and they have their own tree, so that's like the personal thing as well.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm afraid that's a big problem, unresolved problem. And, but maybe if we end on a more positive note, I don't know whether it's positive or not, but you had a mosquito named after you.
Yes.
Was this because you were stung so often, or how did you get this name?
Well, I was assisting these two gentlemen who were actually here, Alexander and Risto, and they were there with me. And we were hiking in Gangao. We did a long walk, so Alexander went. There's this big, gigantic rock, and Alexander went down there with our guide Benson, who has been working as my assistant all the time. So they went there, and he took a water sample from that water that was underneath that big rock, and that is where where the mosquito was, and that's how I got the name. So I will live forever now.
Very well deserved. So then the classical final question. Well, now you know certainly much more than you did when you started, and you have the whole study developed, and you started with the dwarf lemurs, and then you went into the other species, and so it all developed somehow. Now, what would you do differently, or what would you think would be the next steps to take with this type of study?
Well, I don't know what would I do differently, because now it seems like it makes perfect sense. But I can tell you that when I was doing it, it didn't make sense. And I was there in the forest for months thinking that, oh my God, what kind of research paper can you write about this? Because I didn't know. I'm surprised that it ended up, that it grew like this, that now it's a story and all these wonderful people have joined in. So, but I'm hoping to get students that could continue my work. Personally, I think that these tree hierarchies kind of landed on me, so this is what I will keep on working at. Their taxonomy, their conservation, there's more work than I can do during my lifetime. So I'm also hoping that other researchers will continue and join in and start working, and it is actually happening. There's tree hierarchy research also already going on. Somebody's going to Ethiopia, somebody's doing it in Mozambique, also in Nigeria. So I get contacts from people contacting me that, okay, we have a hierarchy here. And then, of course, I'm happy to help anybody who's interested, because there's no competition when you study nocturnal mammals. It's like everybody's invited and free to join this, because it's challenging and it's hard work. But yes, I think the tree hierarchies are my main focus at the moment, because they are so close to going extinct. The populations are so tiny, like the ones in Zanzibar, there's maybe 100 animals left, if we are lucky. And they have to go underground to survive, because there are no big trees left anymore. So the situation with many most likely undescribed species is really critical, and they are gone. They might be gone in 10 years.
Okay, well, I'm sorry that we end with some kind of frustrating message, but I think it's probably something that we also have to face. And from my point of view, I would like to end the discussion. Thank you very much. Yeah. Well, I think we've heard a very interesting talk, a very, from my point of view, very informative discussion. And I took a couple of notes and simply wanted to briefly summarize my impressions about the thesis and the discussion itself. From what I understand it, from what we have seen, Hanna has really broken new grounds. And that's something really exceptional. She had been studying animals with a different sensory world, and a world that was not our own. And from what I understand is that your original topic was, there's something in the forest, you have no idea what it is, go in and do a thesis. And that's what you did. The alternative would have been that to come out of the forest and either say, that's impossible. The other option would be that you have not come out of the forest anymore. There's also a fair chance that things like this happen. And I really think that that's something that's not really acknowledged in academia. And excuse me, I'm losing my voice, but I'll shut up very quickly. But that's something we are not evaluating enough. People who go to the forest, it's slippery, it's rainy, you get stung by mosquitoes, you have mites, it's miserable, you are tired, and you fall down, the equipment breaks, the battery runs out, the accu is gone, and you still work. And excuse me. And it's so much different from somebody going into the lab with a predefined hypothesis and then just putting your vials in a sequencer and you get your results. And that's something we do not value. We do not value enough. What I also think is must be acknowledged. Sorry, now I forgot what I wanted to say. doesn't matter, it might come back. No, but, yeah, sorry, no, I know. I think there are two different approaches. One is a very hypothesis-driven approach. That's mainly what we have in experimental science, and it's certainly good. We need this. It's wonderful. But with this hypothesis, we very often only find out what we are looking for. With the approach of Hanna, you will find new things that we didn't know before. And so I think that's what really makes science advance. And that's why I really highly value this thesis and your approach. And I think your results are impressive. They are not perfect. They cannot be perfect. But again, that's what science is about. You develop new questions and then you advance further, and that's just a wonderful thing. I think you have shown in the discussion and also throughout your work that you are able to put your results and your own work into the proper perspective. You have doubts, you question yourself, you develop a new approach, and you make progress. You certainly never find the absolute truth, and it would be boring, because then you wouldn't be here anymore. Somebody else would have found it long ago. But having said all of this, I also would like to emphasize that a study like this is never one man, or in this case a one-woman show. It's always a group effort, and you have the people who organize the study, who try helping to fund it. You have the supervisors who sit there, supervise, and then we only can hope for the best and to see the students again, eventually with good results. So that's also something that's to be highly valued. Good supervisors supervise, they advise, but then they let people go. And I think that's what happened also in your case. And you took the opportunity and you did it well. What we often forget is you have all these people who really help you, who make this study work, but we forget the local people who show you where the forest is, then how to get in there, and more important, how to get out there. And I think so. It's a group effort, and actually everybody should have earned a doctoral degree with this. Some already have one, so they don't need it. But it's we must acknowledge many more people than just Hanna. But Hanna, you are the most important person today. And with this remark, I really would like to close the discussion. And I think I have to give some kind of recommendation for the faculty. From my point of view, from my perspective, you have shown that you are an excellent scientist. You can pose good questions. You can try to answer them. You can put them in a perspective. You can develop new questions. And I think that's what I said. That's what science is all about. And I highly recommend you to be awarded this degree of Doctor of Philosophy. Thank you.
Honored opponent, I thank you so much for your kind words, and we are almost ready to conclude. So now, if anyone present wishes to make any comments concerning my dissertation, please ask the custos for the floor.
So I cannot see any questions for the floor or the roof or any other place. I think we're all content, so I declare this defense closed.
And I'm inviting everybody to have coffee and cakes outside this lecture room. So thank you and welcome.
0-2. Helsingissä tarvii tämmöistä. Hyvin jakso.
Reading this one. What are you doing?
We're going there. So you guys don't.
No niin.
Itse asiassa ei ole osaamista. Yes, we have some. Don't need the forest.
Ossian, onko sulla isoja bileitä ollut vai onko? Onko sulla itselläsi isoja bileitä tulossa vai onko ollut?
Suunnitelmissa ainakaan.
Aina pitää bileitä.
Hyvä olla.
Jaa.
Yes. Now it might
Tuolla on. Ei, mä jaan kaikki. Niitä on niin muuta.
Joo, niin mutta kutsuttu illalla.
I'm just staying for coffee.
Ja mutta meidän EP-WhatsApp. Ja sen takia täällä tai syöttekö te kun siinä on se dinner? Osallistutteko te ihan siihen? Mä olin kauhuissani, että ihan pitää olla mun niinku turvaa. Siihen tulee vaan kaikki aikuisia. Niin. Kaikki tutkijahuiput ja minä. Ei niin, nimenomaan just jotenkin teidän pitää puhua.
So I'll need to use some criteria to decide. There's gonna be a few questions.
Mitä se on? Teet Hanna
Scores and how it relates to your thing or your
miten
whether you can take it next year. I'll need to prioritize those.
onneksi alkuun.
I'll try to send the email. Today or on Monday because I need to make the decisions next week.
Ja tiedätkö heidän parissa kaikkeri?
In theory, it's supposed to, but they're changing the budget again. So it's a budget issue more than anything else. I was supposed to do it last year and next year, not this one. So it's next year was supposed to be there.
Joo, mutta se on vielä, kun se Hanna venäilee jotain lupia sieltä, niin sit se on vielä. Tuo mainitsi, että jotkut oli tai ole siellä tiedä. Oliko sä ton Intel kanssa vaan? Ai totta, ne oli. Ai ei, okei. Ei, mä tulin vaan puhumaan. Mitä on kannattaa? Se oli käsketty jotain ekana kahvia. Meillä rupesi valua niin joku 5 minuuttia ennen kuin toi loppui. Se oli tosi kriittistä, mä vaan... Apua! Mut se on nyt... Joo.
Se on sellainen isoisa hahmo.
Jep. Sellainen mukava lentää setä.
Ja ihan sikaviksi jotenkin kysymyksiä aika läpi.
Joo, jep.
Mitä elefantit pääsivät sinne puuhun ja muita hyviä.
Tässä on hyvä inspiraatio myös sitten graduun. Mitä tässä pitäisi kertoa näistä? Siellä on nyt kahvit ja kakut siellä ulkona ja järjestelmä pari kuvaa. Silleen mä otin pari, mutta otetaan vähän päästä.
So I cannot now give you exactly the number of hours.
We can talk about
And it depends on how much work we have and what task is going to be assigned to.
Okay. Okay, then maybe we can.
Well, we can see more precisely.
We can talk in general. Yeah.
this is not going to close for a while because usually I guess
standard time for PhD defense is considered to be 5 to 6 hours.
Ah,
So,
okay. Did you like it?
okay. Yeah.
So you were saying not many people do
primates here.
because he was talking about it, I was like, what? I thought no one was doing that.
There's no professor working on primates. Any help from any professor.
Ah, yeah, in fact, I know him from the Botanical Museum. Yeah.
But then at some point, I guess before I was here, there was someone from South America who was working for chimpanzees or orangutans. It was in the zoo. Which I don't want to do.
You don't want to work in the zoo?
No. I mean, it would be nice, but then, I don't know.
Because I actually I'm working with, I found a supervisor.
Primates. If you want to work with primates like lemurs, Andre is working on it.
On lemurs?
But he's working on more on the distribution of the link for the lemurs. It's the article that he got from the you had the same article to read. When you came to visit, you had the sheet.
When I came to visit
the labs.
Oh yeah?
You had the PDF for each article.
Yes, yes, yes.
So the article from our lab was the bamboo lemur.
Oh, okay, yeah, maybe I don't remember now.
Yeah, and that was published by UC. He's a professor now in BK, but he does more socioeconomics. It's more societal, it's more with the people. He works with census. But I guess he had a meeting with Mara. He said that it doesn't work anymore. But then because it's
Really?
Yeah.
But she's not here.
She lives in Stony Brook, US.
Ah, because in the US they're really active on these things.
Yeah, I mean, she was the one, I guess, who was responsible, or one of the main person for the referendum for the national park candidates.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she's quite well known. So I guess he's or something.
He's not here now.
He's a professor, but not here.
He's not here right now.
Here?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
But if you try to find the article, that article, it's in PDF.
Yeah. Okay.
It's in the
I'm sorry, I didn't.
No, people always have searching for me. She was asking